Gracias, Alex y Rudy, por cancelar tu vacación para estar aquí donde están. Gracias. I'm Kyle Drake, and these are my children. This is Carter, Colson, Aiden, and Gracie. I'm going to read this. If I look at you, I probably won't make it through. I met Jay, Catherine, and Caleb the very first day of college when we were 18 years old. The first thing I noticed about Jay as a typical 18-year-old boy was her long, wavy, beautiful blonde hair. And I saw her eyes, this celestial green-blue that, to me, held the sky and the ocean all at once. She was stunning. And then she spoke in that raspy, cool voice. But it was what came out of her mouth that made me ask myself what was so different about her. She asked me questions about me. A complete stranger 2 minutes before, and she wanted to know about me without any interjection of words about herself. She had so much joy, it was more than happiness. I didn't sense an ounce of sadness or hurt or insecurity in her. And to me, an insecure romantic, it was a salve to my heart. I was immediately attracted in every way. But then I found out about her boyfriend was a 6'4", first-round draft pick baseball player, and that pretty much shot any notions I had, so oh well. But we became good friends, and a group of us were hanging out in her and Carrie's dorm room, and I noticed a sticker, Jay, on our wall, which said, "With God, there are no coincidences." And to me, that was a new concept. God, whom I feared because I knew I was not good. I didn't know. Being overall so much that there are no coincidences in life, that stirred my heart. Maybe Jay being the first girl I met was not so coincidental as I would have thought it was random and by chance. So as the big group that Jay and I hung out with one night was disbanding, she and I were both lingering as if to want to prolong the night some more. And I asked her if she wanted to walk. So we began walking around campus, and the questions just poured out. And if you know Jay, as others have mentioned, you know exactly what I mean. She was probing deeply into who I am, what I enjoy doing, about my background. And as I told her I love to sing old jazz songs and write letters, play the saxophone, speak Spanish, and travel, I could tell her eyes were even brighter. I knew there was something more between us. But I had a couple of problems. 6'4" baseball boyfriend guy was one. The second was that Carrie, her best friend forever and roommate, hated my guts because I was kind of a jerk to everyone but Jay. So I had to overcome that. But not long after, we fell in love, and God had to heal me of my insecurities and teach me that love is not affection, but rather an intentional action, as 1 Corinthians 13 tells us. And once I did that, Carrie stopped hating me and we became buddies. I met Jay's amazing parents and fell in love with them. John's fun-loving, deeply caring self. And I saw quickly that Jay was a reflection of Gail. And I noticed that Jay had this consistent cough, and she told me it was like bronchitis. And then one night, after months of being a thing, she wanted to tell me something. She was nervous and scared, and finally, through tears, she told me she had something called CF, but didn't want to utter the words. I'd seen a movie sometime before about a girl with CF, and I remembered, cystic fibrosis, I said. And she waited for my reaction, wondering if that would send me away. I could see the fear in her eyes, but the thought of rejecting this magnificent person whom I love never entered any calculation in my mind whatsoever. When you love, you don't calculate, and I loved her. We were together all through college and married right after we graduated at 22. Some of you were there and remember how fun that was. It was literally a 21-minute wedding and a 12-hour reception party hosted by my father-in-law. I'm not kidding. And of course, we were off, but I heard that all the pictures fell off the walls of the house that night. No joke. I remember that at that time, I equated godliness and goodness with how much you know and the good activities you do. I was soaking up theology, studying all I could, and well, I saw Jaye not doing as much of that as me, and I wondered if there's something wrong with her. Maybe she wasn't growing in her faith like I was. Anyway, Jaye told me that her greatest aspiration was always to be a mother, and I saw that strong and sincere desire in her heart, and I deeply wanted that for her. We decided to try and have children, and soon found out that CF is a tremendous barrier to fertility. So after 5 years of trying and treatments and procedures, Jaye came to a place after many tears and pain where she was at complete peace that God would do what he knew was best for us. She completely trusted him and was willing to let go of her desire and hang on to and trust God. And only at that point did he give us Carter. An amazing surprise. We didn't think it was possible. Jaye developed insulin-dependent diabetes during the pregnancy, but she just took it all in stride. It's just another thing to take care of. 2.5 years later, an even bigger surprise, twins. Fertility doctor appallingly suggested we reduce one of the babies, which of course we immediately rejected, trusting God as the giver of life and the greatest physician. Jaye's belly grew quickly, and her body was doing all it could to keep on. Bedridden and on oxygen, she never stopped smiling. And so many people came around us, especially our moms, Gail and Pam, Jeff and Cammie, my sisters Tiny and Erica, among others. The babies were 6 weeks premature, and Aiden was basically fine. But Colson's little body wasn't completely baked yet. He was incubated, intubated, poked and prodded, trying to give his little lungs time to finish growing to support his little life. I was terrified, and I questioned everything. Jaye trusted that this was no mistake and good would come of it, no matter how painful. Well, Colson healed and came home 7 weeks later, and there we were, 3 kids under 3, survival mode kicked in, but Jaye recovered quickly and got better. What I learned during that time in my mind about real, trusting, radical faith, and faith that George Mueller and Hudson Taylor had, but it was in my head. I hadn't practiced it. But I knew that Jaye trusted God for everything, but I didn't, and I wanted to. So what do we do for me to truly learn to trust? We moved to Florida to start a business with Matthias and Lindsay, and to live next door to Jeff and Cammie and live in real community. 3 kids under 3, wife with CF and diabetes, crazy expensive health insurance, in a city we'd never lived in before, to start a business none of us had done before. That was crazy. But if Jesus' promises in Matthew chapter 6 are true, I wanted to live like I believed it. I wanted the faith that Jaye had, and Jaye never worried once about it. But I wish I could say the same, but I can't. Even if it meant struggle, I wanted to trust God and depend upon him and learn not to be fraudulently self-sufficient. But God always provided, just as Jaye knew he would. And we saw God moving again through our circumstances and events, believing there are no coincidences. And we found ourselves moving to Atlanta to help with Christos Community Church, our bilingual Spanish-English church here. And Jeff and Cammie were being called to Atlanta to come and pastor here at Perimeter. Through an almost unbelievable chain of events, we ended up buying houses side by side again, but buying a year apart. A story I'd love to tell you, but you probably won't believe me, so I won't. But again, no coincidences. I look back on everything we've been through, and there were a lot of really, really hard things, and I see that through it all, God was using each relationship, each friend, each good thing, each painful experience to speak to us, to mold us and form us. Through all things, God was working for our eternal good and using Jaye to show the world that he can not only create the beauty of the stars and the mountains and the seas, he can change us and make us like Jesus, the most beautiful person to ever walk the face of this earth. Jaye was always fascinating to me, but it was when we came to Atlanta that I began to see just how special God made her. As I was humbled by the real estate crash, on my knees asking the Lord to help me keep believing him through the times when I didn't know how we were going to make it, I saw even more crisply how strong Jaye's faith was. She knew the difficulty of making it financially when an atomic bomb had gone off in my area of business. But I will tell you, I never saw any evidence whatsoever of her worrying, not once. God provided over and over, and Jaye's health maintained. There were bouts of lung infections and IV antibiotics, but Jaye overall was doing well. She was disciplined to take care of herself, and we did whatever we possibly could to help her get rest and get all she needed. Jaye even began gaining weight, something she could hardly ever do. And after a cruise to Cozumel with Jeff and Cammie, God gave us a gift that we thought was impossible to have without medical help. We called her Grace. Well, thinking about our trip, we almost called her Cozumela or Margarita. Grace described the absolute gift that she was to us. And looking back, as I was humbled in the hard times of the business, I learned it was easy to learn the teachings of the Bible, theology, to gain knowledge. But all of that meant nothing, absolutely nothing, if it doesn't translate into living it out. And it's then that I realized that the hardest thing in this world to do is to love people selflessly, to have joy in the midst of suffering, to have true peace, a peace that's beyond human understanding in your heart, that no matter what happens, God loves you, and we use all things together for good for His child. To be patient, kind, to just be good and exude true goodness, to be faithful to God and to those you love no matter what, to be gentle when you want to lash out, and to be self-controlled, especially over your tongue, which can do the most harm in life. Being these things from the heart is the hardest thing in the world to do. And as I looked at my wife with that truth, I saw the closest embodiment of those virtues that I'd ever seen in my life. It's easy when remembering someone who has died to eulogize, to extol their virtues and exaggerate their qualities and ignore their sins. And all of you who knew her saw the fruit of God in her life. But maybe you wondered what she was like behind closed doors in the tough times. Jaye was not perfect. But most of the time when she sinned, it was because I brought it out of her. Jaye struggled with communicating, and that often boiled over in parenting interactions with our budding teenagers into yelling at them. But she was deeply repentant about that in those times, and she's always sought forgiveness. But I can tell you that in the 24 years I knew Jaye,